All right, let's get started. My name is Valerie Sands. I'm a second year here at Fuqua.
And I'm Vinesh Kapil. I'm also a second year, and
we are the co-presidents of the Design and Innovation Club. Our club is focused on introducing Fuqua MBA students to the power of human-centered design and design thinking. Our goal this year and the goal of the summit is to showcase how design and innovation methodologies can be used across a variety of industries, from tech to consulting to social impact.
So one of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking about as a club this year, and we'll be speaking about throughout the summit, is the importance of designing for a variety of communities. Designing for accessibility, designing for gender equity, designing for racial justice. These are all incredibly important applications of this field and something that this field is really starting to take hold of. To that end, we're thrilled and lucky to kick off our summit with John Samuel, the founder and CEO of Abler. John impacts businesses and people with innovative strategies on digital accessibility. His experience includes stints in domestic and international industries over the last 15 years. At Abler, John focuses on helping organizations be more inclusive by making digital content accessible for people of all abilities. John's passion for his work is very personal, as he is blind and wants to make sure the obstacles that he has faced are removed for others. He serves on the board of directors for the Aravind Eye Foundation in India, the Raleigh Mayor's Persons with Disability Committee, and has won a number of incredible awards. Most importantly, however, John knows no barriers. You can find him exploring the ends of the world, from summiting Mount Kilimanjaro to drinking Pisco Sours in Lima. We've all had a chance in the club to meet with John prior to the summit, and we are so inspired by his story and so grateful for him to share his insights with us today. So John, the floor is yours, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and I'm so excited to be here and be the opening keynote for today's exciting event. I want to start off with a quick question. Do you remember the last time you were on an airplane before masks and social distancing were a thing? Well, for me, it was the last weekend of February 2020, and I was traveling to Seattle to speak at an event out there. If you don't remember, at that time in Seattle was the center of coronavirus, because right then at that time they had the first reported cases of COVID-19. And before I left for my trip, my wife loaded me up with tons of hand sanitizer and wipes, and she instructed me to wipe down everything I touched. The trip was a success, and I ended up coming home safely. So when I got back, she invited me back into the house after a few showers itself, but my suitcase just wasn't as lucky, and I think it's still sitting in our garage. The other invitation I got was to come and speak to you here today. While on the plane, and between the constant hand sanitizing, I met Ayan Chakravarti, who's a Duke MBA candidate and part of the amazing team who put this event on today. I'm really just gracious and thankful for the opportunity to come and speak today, because I'm just so proud to be able to share my story with you. Duke holds a very special place in my heart, even though I didn't go here for school. And there's three key memories that really stick out to me. Today is one of them, being able to speak here with you and being invited to do that. But before I share the other two memories, I want to let you know why design thinking is so important to me. As it was mentioned in my bio, I am blind. And because of that, I've had these allies, just like Ayan, who have been there around me and helped me to support me in figuring out a way to keep moving forward. Now I'd like to introduce you to another type of ally, which is spelled a little bit differently. It's spelled A, the number 11, Y. The number 11 represents the 11 characters between the letters A and Y in the word accessibility. For those of us in the digital accessibility space, this form of ally means a lot more than just an easier way to spell accessibility, which it is, but rather it represents a movement towards making tech more inclusive of all people. What you need to understand, because of my blindness, there have been times in my professional and personal life where I felt like I just didn't belong. And that's forced me to rethink what diversity and inclusion means to me. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to another acronym, IDEA, or IDEA. This builds on the whole notion of diversity and inclusion. The I stands for inclusion, D stands for diversity, and E stands for equity, which is now synonymous with many of the diversity and inclusion initiatives. And it means removing the barriers for fair and just treatment of all people. A stands for accessibility, which means providing access to people of all abilities and experiences. My hope is that by the end of my talk, you'll see why it's important to make sure that people feel like they belong, but also show how that sense of belongingness leads to greater productivity, stronger loyalty, higher revenue, and not to mention happier and safer employees. And what organization doesn't want that? I think it's important to know that I wasn't always blind. I'm one of those few people who were actually born and raised in Cary, North Carolina. But when I was 9 years old, my dad was transferred to Tokyo. But during the summers, we used to come back home to the US. I remember one summer, I was laying in the yard of my cousin's house and spending hours looking up at the stars in the sky. However, the next summer, when I came back and I was laying in the same yard and looking up at the same dark sky, I could no longer see the stars. When I reflect back, I think this was the first time that I realized that I saw it differently than others. After 3 years in Japan, we came back to the US. And this is where my second memory of Duke came in. This is when I fell in love with Duke basketball. I would religiously watch the Blue Devils play, hoping that one day that I would be on that court, or at Cameron Crazy. But in the mid-90s, Coach K was considering leaving for the NBA. As a middle school kid, I decided to take things into my own hands. And I wrote a letter, and I took it to his mailbox and hand-delivered it, pleading him not to leave. We all know how that turned out, so you can thank me for that. In high school, my dreams of going to the NBA were fading away because I really wasn't really good at basketball. But I did develop a really great group of friends who were unknowingly covering up my vision loss. But after high school, I ended up going to college in Richmond, Virginia, at Virginia Commonwealth University. And it was during my freshman year of college that I realized that something was going on with my sight, because I was constantly walking into things and I was starting to get hurt. During the winter break of my freshman year, I saw a specialist and I was diagnosed with a degenerating eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa, or RP for short. This news was devastating. And the first things that went through my head were, what girl would want to be with a guy who can't see? What kind of job could I have if I was blind? And where could I live if I couldn't drive? These questions and many more just constantly consumed me. And my actions led to me failing out of college. I ended up moving back home to North Carolina and moving in with my high school buddies who were going to NC State. My friends who I'd grown up with knew that there was something wrong with my eyes, but they didn't know the extent of it. But no one had any idea that I had failed out of college. And so to keep up with impressions, I enrolled in classes at NC State. But while I was in class, I started noticing more changes in my sight, especially at nighttime. And so during class, I was constantly monitoring the clock because I needed to get home before sunset. I was like a reverse vampire. You'd find me on the road during the day, but rarely at night. But after graduation, I knew I had to get out of North Carolina. Driving was becoming way too difficult, and it wasn't safe for me to be on the road. And so I decided to take a job in Bangalore, India. The main reason for me to choose Bangalore was because I knew I could get a car and driver. After 2 years in India, I decided to come back to the US and move to New York City. Public transportation was great. And not to mention, the most New York thing you could do was bump into someone and just keep walking. This was like the perfect place for me. Once again, I started seeing more changes in my eyes. When I was looking at my computer screen up until this point, I was able to just increase the font size and I was able to get by. But now that wasn't working for me. However, I found this Microsoft mouse that would allow me to magnify content on the screen, and it was game-changing. While in New York, though, I was working for the city of New York, providing financial education for city employees during the recession. But when I started looking at my friends who were working in finance and law, I didn't see the same type of career trajectory for me. And as many of them were looking to get their MBAs, I didn't think I had much to offer, especially since I was losing my sight. At the same time, I reconnected with a man named Steve Clemens, who was an executive at that company I worked for in India. And now he was on the board of a company called Aster. They were a cell phone tower manufacturing company, and they wanted to start up operations in Cameroon. I immediately jumped at the opportunity, even though I had no idea where Cameroon was. But I thought it would help differentiate me from others if I wanted to go do my MBA. Steve knew I had some type of eye condition, again, just like my high school and college buddies, but he didn't understand the extent of it. By this time, I had become such a pro about hiding the fact that I couldn't see that very well. After agreeing on terms of my contract, we went out to go celebrate. This is when the executives of the company realized I couldn't see. Afterwards, the executives of the company said they would give me 6 months and then we can go our separate ways. So I moved out to Douala, Cameroon from Manhattan and was tasked with starting up a company from scratch. Despite what many of those other executives thought, Steve's commitment to me was strong, and he was a true ally to me. I then had an opportunity to build a company around the values that I thought a company should have. And the employees who joined all became allies of mine. Because of the support of my team, we were able to take a $20,000 investment and generate over $12 million in revenue and $2.4 million in profit in just the 14 months of operation, all along while I was losing my sight. After this achievement, those same executives who didn't want to give me a chance asked me to give them 6 months notice before I left. After 3 years working in Africa, I had achieved the goals I had set out for myself. I had built a multi-million-dollar company, which I was able to spread across the continent, and I even summited Mount Kilimanjaro. And at this time, I felt like I had proven it myself, and I belonged to business school just like my other friends. So when I started looking at business schools, I limited my search to just 2 cities, New York and Washington. I thought these were the only 2 places I could live with my limited sight. As I was researching different schools, I started sending out my resume and requesting information from different programs. One day I received an email from somebody named Liesl Riddle. She was the associate dean of the business school at George Washington University. And she wanted me to come out and visit the campus and meet with her graduate assistants. I was ecstatic. For somebody who had been failing out of college, this was a great experience for somebody wanting me. So I flew out and visited the campus. The folks at GW made me feel welcomed. And there was people from all over the world. And not to mention, the campus was right in the middle of the city with public transportation everywhere. But because I was in DC, I thought I might as well go over and visit Georgetown, which was just a mile away. However, when I walked into the MBA office and I explained I had just come from Cameroon and was interested in talking to someone about their program, the person at the desk told me, like, everything's online. You can find out there. Needless to say, I didn't apply, and it became the best decision of my life. During my first week of orientation, I found myself at a networking event with assigned seats, but I couldn't see where I was supposed to go sit. So I turned to the person next to me for help, and it happened to be Liesl Riddle, the same person who had recruited me to GW. And little did I know at that time that she was about to become my next ally. What I didn't know about Liesl was that she was a parent of a child with a disability, and she could empathize with what I was going through. She introduced me to students with the Disability Student Services, and she encouraged me to be open about my vision loss with my classmates. I often say this was the first time I could be my authentic self, and I was able to open up my heart. And as a result, I met my wife in the program. Despite the fact that I was able to now talk openly about my vision loss with my classmates, I was still fearful about disclosing my disability with potential employers because I thought they would see it as a liability. I struggled to find a job after graduation, despite having great phone interviews, because when it came down to those in-person interviews, the employers just weren't expecting somebody who couldn't see. Eventually, I landed on my feet, joining an emerging market crowdfunding startup. But in 2017, there was a shift in investment appetite, and our company, which was backed by USAID, was now folding, and I was out of a job. My wife and I had just built a house in the DC area. We also just welcomed our first child. The stress of all of this caused my sight to go fast. And I no longer could look at the computer screen, despite the magnification and everything else I was learning, the accommodations I had figured out. I thought my career was over. Around the same time, a buddy of mine from high school sent me this article about this software that was developed at SAS. It was designed to help people who are blind visualize graphs and charts using sounds. I thought it was pretty cool, but really what got my attention was the fact that the software was developed by a guy named Ed Summers, who had the same eye condition as me. And up until this point, I had never met another blind person, and he lived in my hometown of Cary, North Carolina. I tried for months to get in touch with him with no luck. Finally, my wife said, if he can live in North Carolina, maybe we could too. So we looked online and we found a house that we liked. We told my folks and they got so excited. They never thought I was coming home. My dad immediately jumped in the car to go look at this house. And as he's driving, he started yelling at something. I was like, what are you doing, Dad? And he's like, oh, there's a blind guy on the road. Maybe it's the guy you're trying to get in touch with. I was like, Dad, please don't yell at blind people on the road. Don't yell at anyone on the road. So he got out of the car and he walked towards the guy on the road. He said, are you Ed Summers? And the poor guy says, yes, I am. And my dad puts a phone in this guy's ear and says, my son's trying to reach you. After apologizing profusely to Ed, he agreed to meet me. And he eventually became a friend and mentor to me. Coming from DC, you're so defined by your job. People's first question were, what do you do? They don't even care about your name. So I started thinking about, if I'm struggling to find a job, what are other people who don't have the same experience, education, or privilege, and what were they doing? At the time, I had been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I had heard about Tom Shoes, the business where you buy a pair of shoes, they give a pair of shoes to somebody in need. I liked the concept, but what I wanted to do was make sunglasses, because usually wherever I went, I had a pair of sunglasses nearby. But rather than giving a pair of sunglasses to somebody who was blind, I wanted the sunglasses to be made by somebody who was blind. I thought if we could give somebody a job, we could give them hope, we could give them life, and then there's this generational impact. Once Ed heard about this, he decided to make an introduction to Jeffrey Hodding, who's the president of LCI, and it's the largest employer of Americans who are blind. I had no idea they were just located 7 miles from where I grew up. As I was speaking to Jeffrey, I went into the meeting wanting to learn more about manufacturing, but he kept on talking about wanting to create technology jobs for people who are blind. A few months later, I ended up joining LCI to start that business that he was talking about. And we first started focusing on accessibility because I knew firsthand that this was a major issue that people like myself were facing when we were looking for jobs. When I joined LCI, it was like coming out of the closet, a blind person. And it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. I finally felt like I belonged. It was a sense of belonging why when I was looking for jobs, I had been reaching out to companies who had a diversity and inclusion program. However, I felt like a lot of these organizations, I just didn't fill a box they wanted to check off. Then over the last couple of years, I've become an active member of the diversity and inclusion community, and I've started to see a change. I've seen it go from a D&I being a compliance issue to becoming a business case. Last October, we launched Abler, which is a joint venture between LCI and Walk West, which is a fast-growing digital agency here in North Carolina. And we launched the new business because we wanted to remove the barriers that had been keeping people with disabilities out of the workforce. At Abler, we're helping companies be more inclusive and accessible and making sure that they're ready to employ people with disabilities. This is really helping to build the demand for employees with disabilities. So in an effort to help build up the supply, we're now launching Abler Works, which is a workforce development program focused on preparing and training the workforce of tomorrow. As you think about your own teams, stakeholders, and customers, ask yourself, do they feel a sense of belonging? I challenge you all to rethink what diversity and inclusion means to you and to think about what actions you can take to improve equity and access in your own organizations and teams. But before I go, I wanted to share my third story about my Duke memory. Since I was diagnosed with RP, it's been around 20 years. And during that time, I've been seeing doctors all over the globe. But since I started joining LCI 3 years ago, I've been going to the Duke Eye Center. And the main reason I've been going there is because the The building itself is named after our former CEO, Bill Hudson. And also LCI was the lead funder of the new building. But the second reason I went there was around 6 months before I joined LCI, there was a doctor named Dr. Iacone who joined the Duke team. And his focus was actually on my specific gene mutation. And so when I met with him, after checking me out, he said, I think I have a treatment for you. And you have to understand, during this last 20 years, I've never heard any good news when I go to the eye doctor. So I was a little skeptical about what he was trying to sell me. But 18 months later, we've seen that his treatment has been able to diminish my vision loss, and also it's even starting to plateau. And he thought my eye was even healthier, that I could actually go through cataract surgery and try to regain some usable vision. But what I actually got was a gift of being able to see my kids for the first time. And so this past January, I saw my boys for the first time, and it was an amazing gift. And for that, I am just so thankful to be here and be part of this, this organization and be part of, the Duke family. So thank you so much.
John, thank you so much for sharing your incredible and inspiring story with us. I think your resilience and your determination to do good in this world is really a lesson that we can all take away. And the fact that you're doing it through designing technology tools and workforce development is just all the more exciting for us as MBA students who are interested in that kind of work. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Folks, we're going to jump into some Q&A with John. So please feel free to chat your questions in to the Q&A section of the Zoom, and we'll be reading them out to him. We've already had a few come in, so we'll start with this one. And John, what is something that we can do as MBA students to get involved with increasing digital accessibility in our own communities?
Yeah, I think one of the first things, that's a great question. So thank you for that. I think the first thing that it's asking the question, is it accessible? If you don't know, it's to ask people to make sure that, is it accessible? Try talking to people, because there's people who are using assistive technology all around us. We just may not know it. And so it's important to ask the question. And then as we go through, you can try to, one of the quick ways to try testing is actually just go through your own keyboard and try tabbing through, and to not use your mouse. We get so used to using our mouse to click and point and click and do everything we need. But one way to make sure is that there's also many people who just use a keyboard. And so you can test out by just tabbing through. But, I think it always comes back to asking the questions, making sure that, if you don't know, then finding people who can help you out. But it just should be part of our kind of more thinking about the design and thinking about it from a design process. That's initially where we need to start thinking about accessibility.
Yeah, I love that. Just having that sort of ingrained in how we think and do everything. I think that's incredible advice for us. The next question is a question around a personal favorite of yours. So can you think of, or can you share with us rather, your favorite inclusively designed technology, product, or service?
Yeah, I'm not wearing it right now, but there is a watch called by Ewan. It's the Bradley watch. It's a beautiful timepiece. So one of the biggest, it was a big challenge. It was when I was in New York. I remember all my friends who had these big fancy watches. So when I started making some money when I was in Africa, I went and bought myself a nice fancy watch. But as my sight started to diminish, I could no longer see the watch. So it was like impractical for me to have this. But then I came across the Ewan Bradley watch, and it's a fully tactile watch, and it's so beautiful. You can touch it with your hands, and you can feel the dial and the timepiece. So where the minute hands and hour hands, they're actually ball bearings, and they go around the watch itself. And it truly is a beautiful watch. So if you can go take a look at it, and I think it won the 2011 or 2012 London Design of the Year. And it actually came out of an MBA student who was at MIT, and he had a classmate who was blind who asked him for the time, and he realized that there was a problem there.
It seems like every time I hear or we hear about new products like that, there's always an incredible origin story like that. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Next set of questions here are really around the work that you are doing right now at Ablr and around some of the partnerships that you've been working on. In particular, this question comes from one of our peers. I'm curious how Ablr is thinking about access to its technology, particularly smaller companies or nonprofits or public schools that cannot afford it, but really could benefit from its use.
Yeah, I mean, we really want to make sure that accessibility is attainable, right? Because if it should be for everybody. And so what we've been doing is really working on a lot of partnerships. So we launched something called the Abler Ally Program. So as I mentioned, I wouldn't be where I am today without the allies in my life. And that's what we believe. We need partners that we're going to be able to spread the word of accessibility across the state or the nation. And so we're building out a network of partners. But one of the ways we're doing this is also to provide free training for individuals to become accessibility analysts. Because we realize that if we do start to get more work and we want to be able to scale, we need to make sure that we have accessibility analysts across the nation. And that way we can reduce our cost and we can be able to provide more support to different companies in different sizes of organizations, whether they're big organizations or small nonprofits. We want to make sure that accessibility is attainable.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And on the topic or on the note of sort of your own personal workforce development, what do you think some of the key skills or competencies for your design teams internally are to really help them or, put them in a position where they can be designing the most impactful, inclusive products?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. One of the first things we want to work on is building confidence. So we need to design the program in a way that we're setting people up for success and giving them checkpoints and making sure that people don't feel, because there's often a case when you have a disability, there's a lot of barriers that you're already overcoming. And I'll just speak for myself, applying on an application, just applying for it, it can be demoralizing when I can't apply for a job that I know I'm qualified for. And so what we need to make sure is that we keep the confidence level of people up. And so we're designing the program around that. The other thing we want to make sure that when we're designing a program is that we're actually talking to employers and understanding what are the skill sets that they want and need from potential employers. So that then we can also then train and make sure that these employees are filling that gap. We don't want to be training people on things that companies aren't necessarily looking for, but we also want to make sure that we're amplifying those skills and things that we see that a lot of people with disabilities are just naturally strong at. One of those is a problem solver, right? We want to design the program to make sure that we highlight their skills, build up their skills, and also build up their weaknesses. So it does take a lot of different things. It's about talking to the employers, understanding their needs, then also assessing and understanding what the skills and challenges are of an individual. And from there, we've taken those pieces and we're building the program.
Awesome. And if you had a room full of those employers, let's say we had gathered all 500 of the Fortune 500 and you were giving them a talk, what is one myth you'd like to bust or common misconception around employing differently abled people that you'd really like to bring across to them?
Yeah, I mean, there's several actually. But one I would say one is that companies believe that the accommodations are just too expensive. That's just not the case. I think over 50% of the accommodations are less than $500, right? So it's not an expensive thing to be able to accommodate, to do the accommodations to make sure that somebody can do their job, set them up for success. And then it's one of those things that it's something attainable that everybody can do. You don't have to be a large company. You don't have to be a Fortune 500 company to be able to hire somebody, because that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing a lot of companies, these Fortune 500, who are now building out disability ERGs and really kind of helping to help advocate for people to be self-identify and getting jobs in these Fortune 500s. But it's those mid-tier companies and small-tier companies who can also do this. Because what we're seeing is that these top 500, the Fortune 500 companies, they're taking the brightest and the 1% of the disabled community. And then the rest of the community, that's 99%, we need to make sure that we're creating opportunities where they can get job opportunities, experience, so that they can also have a meaningful career. When you look at the blind community itself, what surprised me was that I had no idea before joining LCI that the unemployment rate of people who are blind is 70%. 70% of people who are blind are unemployed. And this is a staggering number. And so there's a lot of opportunities for us to create employment in lots of different companies, and people with disabilities can do a lot of things.
Yeah, that is just a really staggering statistic and speaks to the importance of what you all are doing, of course. We have a whole set of questions that our folks are really interested in sort of the kinds of innovations that exist that help folks who are differently able in the workplace kind of accommodate and sort of really integrate in. So the first one here is, what is the most exciting innovation on your radar that could help blind and other differently able people more easily integrate into the workplace?
Yeah, so I think if we can use AI in the right way. So there's a tool called Seeing AI. It's a free application from Microsoft, and it was actually designed by Anirudh Kool, who's a engineer who designed it during a hackathon in Microsoft. And so what was happening was that one of his colleagues was having trouble seeing his grandparents were having trouble seeing them on Skype. And so during the hackathon, they came up with this application called Seeing AI to help do facial recognition. It reads text. It helps tell currency, and this technology itself is amazing. And so it was actually the first time I used it, I was able to go to a restaurant with my wife, and it was the first time she didn't have to read the menu to me. I had independence because I could just take my phone, swipe it over the menu, and I was able to be able to read the menu on my own. And that independence to be able to decide what I wanted, not what my wife, the three options she gives me. I got to choose my own meal for the first time, which was awesome. And so I think there's a lot of good that's coming out of AI that we can leverage. Some people have been using AI for the accessibility space, but that's the challenge, right? Because that's where it still comes back to human-centric design. No AI solution is going to be able to emulate or provide that human experience. So we have to find where we leverage AI to augment what we're doing. But another piece where we're really working on is on the VR side. We talk about VR as the wild, wild west right now. And so it's important that we start to incorporate accessibility guidelines and rules so that people, when they're designing it, because we're still, as we talked about before, we're in the design phase of a lot of the programs and software for VR, we need to make sure that we're thinking about accessibility at the forefront. So I'd say AI and VR are kind of the two things I'm super excited about.
That's fantastic. And we did not ask John to plug this at all, but that's a perfect link to our following talk. So John, very well done on that. Thank you very much. And so on the topic of sort of integrating and incorporating the human-centered design aspect with the technology itself, could you talk us through an experience that you and your team have had where you sort of iterated on the design of a product or service, given some narratives that you have sort of pulled from human-centered design and how that iteration process was for you?
Yeah, so what makes our team unique is that we actually use analysts who are blind or low vision or have a disability. And so we believe, these are the actual users. So when we talk about, we don't just necessarily make products accessible, we make them usable as well. That's our differentiator, because it's one thing to make something accessible for compliance sake. And then there's also making sure that an actual user is going to be able to do it. And so I'll just first kind of even look at our own website. When we, I mentioned that LCI and Walk West, which is a digital agency, came together to form Abler. And when we were building out the website, the folks from Walk West, they were just thinking about it from their traditional perspective of it's got to look good, and they have this kind of the practices that they do. And we had to, we're coming together and really working on this and really focusing on the person going through that user experience rather than just looking at it from the purely the design phase. But what we realized was that we could have that beautiful aesthetic design with also making sure that it was accessible and usable. And so it's a story that we share often because we went through that when a digital agency that's focused on that visual and an accessibility firm that's focused on making sure that it's, can be used by everybody come together. There's some really beautiful things that can happen out of that.
Yeah, that's a really, really fantastic story. Thank you for sharing that with us, and a really important distinction between just accessible and actually usable and easy to use. We have a really interesting question from one of our audience members. For someone who's blind, touch becomes an important gesture or sense. But after the global pandemic, things have certainly changed with what we can touch and when. What are your thoughts on ways of handling the situation, especially in public health organizations around the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. as I mentioned during my talk, I talked about the hand sanitizing, constantly wiping down. The reason my wife was telling me to wipe down everything is because for me, my hands are my eyes, and so it's a big worry, right? It's something that we need to make sure that people who are blind are going to be protected in that sense, because we do touch everything, whether it be in the elevator. If you think about it, I can't read Braille, but I can often feel the raised numbers. That's how I'm able to tell what floor I'm going to. I know if the elevator doesn't tell me where I am, I'm putting my hand to feel right outside of the elevator bank. There's usually on the side of the right on the side, when you open up the elevator on the side, there's a raised number, and that's how I know where I am. And so you're right. Now, when things are, where we have to be very protective and careful, this is something where people who are blind, we need to be thinking about this, constantly wash our hands, and also having hand sanitizer, because it's something we do need to, we're going to have to do. But, again, this kind of goes back to a lot of the etiquette of kind of disability inclusion. It's asking people, when you see somebody in need, asking them, hey, do you need any help? And the person may tell you no, but asking that question is critical. And so, I think that it's a major concern, and something we do need to be careful about.
Thank you for sharing that with all of us. Just want to call out that we have a number of messages and questions in the chat that are just sort of commenting on folks' admiration for you and just talking about how incredible your journey is and your strength of character. So thank you again for sharing your story with us. I have an interesting question here from an audience member who's asking about how MBA programs can sort of tailor their experience, given you are an MBA graduate yourself, how MBA programs can sort of tailor their experience to be more not just inclusive, but usable and truly welcoming of the differently able community.
Yeah, just like what we're seeing in companies right now, self-identification is a big thing. For years I hid the fact because I thought it would be seen as a liability. And so making sure, I remember in the syllabus it says, they have like their ADA or their, if you need disability student service, it's almost like the fine print. But I think if we can really bring it up and make sure that asking accommodations, making sure, does anybody need an accommodation constantly? Because, somebody may not feel comfortable answering the question the first time. So even when we go to events, we should be asking on our, when people are signing up for an event, your name, your email address, also having a box saying, do you need any accommodations? So I think throughout MBA programs, it's not just asking at the beginning of the semester, but asking throughout the time you're there, asking if people need accommodations and to support them. And I think that would be the first way, because that's when people start to feel like, oh, it's something that they truly care about. And again, once you feel like you belong, you'll bring your true self, and you'll get more out of the program as well.
Thank you very much for sharing that. That's an important reminder for all of us who are currently in our programs. And I think not just from the administration perspective, but also from the peer-to-peer perspective, that's really something that we can take forward with us as well. And then a question here, first of all, another compliment, saying you have a very strong human spirit, and you've really just given so much throughout your life. What has sort of inspired you and kept you going on a personal level to want to keep going and creating solutions for other people?
I think there's a couple of things. One, we don't talk about faith in business that often, but that's something that I've held true to me, and it's something that's important to me. The other piece is that, as I mentioned about my high school friends and people throughout my life, they're the ones who I can never thank enough, and it's my way of paying it forward. And so, and I've met what I call these angels throughout my life. I didn't talk about it. When I was in India, when I first got there, my car and driver, I talk about the reason I went there. My first week walking on the streets, I had my driver, and he was still kind of learning, kind of what was, he knew something was wrong with my eyes. I didn't talk about it. He kind of understood something was on, and I was walking on a sidewalk, and he typically didn't walk with me. And I took a step down. Anyone who's been to India, the roads aren't safe. And people don't, I was walking on the street and I almost fell down a hole, and he caught me. And after that day, he never left me. And so his name is Morgan, and I could never repay him for being there for me. Then when I got to Cameroon, same case. I was getting ripped off by a lot of taxi cabs when they found out that I couldn't see, couldn't speak French, and and so I was looking for a cab on the side of the road, and there was this one taxi driver who kept on seeing me and hearing people taking advantage of me. So he told me, go back into your hotel room. No, go back to your hotel and I'll come and get you. And he dropped off somebody and came back. His name was Blaze. And he never left me after that day. He always was by my side. Whether I went to a restaurant, he would go and sit at another table and was always watching out for me. And so one thing that I learned from that experience was that, you're going to meet you're going to see the inner good in people in the most random places. And so if I can kind of just mirror that I see for others, that's what drives me.
That's incredibly powerful, and just a reminder of, as you said, all the good that there is in the world. And I certainly appreciate you sharing that with us. Next question from the audience is, if you have any advice for people who, whether they're students in school or professionals working in various industries or otherwise, for somebody who has, who is differently abled, or for somebody who has a particular ailment and they might be suffering in silence or feeling that same sense of discomfort and expressing and showing themselves openly, what advice do you have for them to sort of overcome or work through that fear?
Yeah, that's a big one. It took me years. I went through bouts of depression, and it was something we don't talk about that often, right? It's the hard times. We talk about all the good, but I went through these times, and it was really, what I found was when I had success was when I was able to be open and talk freely. And so it's important to surround yourselves with people who are supportive of you. And so, it's important. It goes back to having allies. So we as classmates, coworkers, and friends, it's important for us to be empathetic and to not to feel like you have to have the answer for the individual, but be there to listen. And I think that's something in business we often, we overlook is just to be a good listener sometimes. And so, being able to set an environment and culture where somebody can be free to talk is really important. And you'll see when that person is able to take that kind of weight, that weight off their shoulders and their chest, you'll see something really special come out.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I think it's also a reminder that design can be used not just for products and services, but also to design how we interact as community members and how we engage with each other, whether it's our microcosmic communities or our macro communities. So certainly an incredible reminder from you there. So the next question I have from you is really around the project that you're most looking forward to in the future for Abler. So you've shown us and talked to us a little bit about what you all are working on, but is there anything in particular that jumps to your mind as something that really sort of gets your creative juices flowing in the morning when you wake up?
Yeah. So when I think about the Abler umbrella of businesses, Abler, the core business about disability inclusion and accessibility was really at the foundation. We needed to focus on accessibility, because whatever new business, whatever programs, whatever we do, we need to be thinking about accessibility at the foundation. And that's why that's kind of our foundational component, our cornerstone. So Abler Works is what I'm really excited about right now. And that's because I want to make sure that we train the workforce of tomorrow. I think Gartner says that there's going to be 3 times as many people with disabilities in the workforce in the next 3 years by 2023. So if we are not preparing that workforce of tomorrow today, we're going to be missing out. And so that's what that's where my real passion is. I really want to make sure, and I don't want anyone to ever go through the feelings that I went through. And that's really why I'm passionate about Abler Works. But in the horizon, what I'm looking forward to and starting discussions about one is called Abler Shops, which is going to be an e-commerce platform where we can sell products made by people with disabilities. But we'll also have an accelerator to help prepare those entrepreneurs to be able to make sure that they can go to market and have a platform for them to sell their products on. And so what many people don't realize is that many people with disabilities go into entrepreneurship because they can't get a job in today's traditional workforce. So they go into entrepreneurship for themselves. So if we can develop an accelerator to promote and to get these entrepreneurs the skills that they need, and then give them a platform to sell their products, that's what I'm excited about with Abler Shops. And then the next piece after that Now, I talked about the confidence piece, and I realized the confidence that I had when I had financial independence, there's a new level, the level of risk I'm able to take afterwards. And with that said, I want to start something called Abler Wealth. And this is where we're going to be helping to build wealth in the disability community. Because once we're able to get people to think that they can not just have a job and have, have a career that's going to pay them, but if we can help build wealth, that's going to make the biggest impact. And we'll see more risk takers, and we'll see some really good innovation that comes out of that. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, no, that's super exciting. And it's this beautiful, almost like full circle from your start in financial literacy, coming all the way around and being able to provide that financial education back around to this community is really, really powerful. And of course, as you said, entrepreneurship is booming in this space, and hopefully venture capital follows and booms as well. And there's all kinds of work to be done. So for folks who are listening who are interested in either of those, feel free to connect with John. I'm sure he has some great ideas for you. So John, just our last question here before we close out, speaking to our audience, again, of a mixture of students, professionals, folks who are just interested in the field of design, what is your sort of overarching piece of advice for their career and their futures as they start to look forward, into the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think that, when we talk about, again, these diversity and inclusion is, it's kind of top of mind right now. But I think if we can think about inclusion in the foundation of everything we do, right? Making sure that we're removing barriers, and you think about those barriers, how you can remove the barriers for yourself, because if we think about, it's going to improve the experience for everybody. And so as you go through things and through life and companies are thinking about it, the more inclusive we can be, it's going to benefit everybody. And I think about, with me, I think about accessibility as my foundational piece. And I think that's something that a lot of people can think about, is because I think about it from a way of really designing in an inclusive way that then it's going to help everyone. If we think about accessible ramps, for instance, it was designed to help people with wheelchairs get into buildings. But we see as a parent now, it's somebody with a stroller, it's helping to help us get more access to buildings. So if you think about accessibility and inclusivity in the design phase of everything you do, whether it's your career, whether it's in products you build, or it's in processes you build, I think that it's going to serve you well, no matter what you do. So think about accessibility and inclusivity.
Awesome. And thank you for that charge. We will certainly take that forward as we continue to think about our future careers. So thank you to our audience for all of your incredible questions. And again, a huge thank you to John for spending the morning with us. We're so grateful for your time and your insight and your wisdom. So I'd love for everyone to just join together in a little virtual round of applause.
Thank you so much.